You're all up to date. I'll have more for you in the next hour, Joanna.
Thank you very much. Now, let's go back to events in Ukraine. The Defence Secretary Michael Fallon has warned that Russia could attempt to destabilise more former Soviet states in Eastern Europe in the wake of hostilities in Ukraine. He said NATO must be ready to repel Russian aggression. The ceasefire between pro-Russian separatists and Ukrainian government forces appears to be hanging in the balance. Well, we can talk now to Richard Spinks, who's a British businessman whose family has fled Donetsk as a result of the fighting. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you.
You fled, leaving all your wealth that was there behind. Tell us what's happened to you.
Well, actually, we left there in the end of May, early June. It was late. We stayed as long as we could, and then it just became very, very apparent that it was time to leave, and we left actually by rail, leaving our cars in the garage even on the night before the railway line was actually decommissioned by the separatists. So we got out on the last night train out of the region, but still left everything that wasn't literally packable in a suitcase just stayed where it was, including our cars, which we've finally now actually unbelievably got back. But everything
you won't
else
get
is
back
there.
Your house. You've
we can't
left
go there.
Your house behind.
Oh, yeah, we can't go there. I've been accused of all kinds of things by the new government in the region to make sure I don't go back. Yeah.
So tell us what happened then. How you ended up? You'd been in this house for 3 years, and then what happened when it sort of all came to an end?
Well, originally I was watching things getting worse and worse. I'd go up to the Lenin Square in the city centre and try and understand whether it was time to leave or not yet, as the demonstrations were getting more and more violent. And the last demonstration, I didn't actually think I was going to get out of the square at that point. I thought, now is time to leave, and that's when we left the next day. But the house, actually, I put my staff in it to keep an eye on it since June. And just 2 weeks ago, they were ejected under significant threats to their lives by these terrorists who are now living in it.
How had you ended up in Donetsk? I mean, was it an area that you felt a bit nervous about going to in the first place?
No, not in the slightest. I mean, I lived in Makiivka long before that. I've been in Ukraine for nearly 20 years. I think it's a wonderful country, and Donetsk was a great place to live at the time. It was just probably the wrong place to be in 2014. But up until then, I mean, there was no indication whatsoever that anything of this nature would happen, and it was a great place to be.
And do you hold out much hope of actually getting your house back?
No, none whatsoever. Absolutely none. I'm
You're very sanguine
convinced
about this.
Well, I mean, the day I left was the day I wrote it off, because I run a big business, you know, and I've lots of responsibilities, and I've got a family to look after. And you can't dwell on these things, and I'm just fortunate that we left and that we're all okay. And we're still living in Ukraine, but we're just in another part of Ukraine, further west.
And what was it like being there as all of this was
very
unfolding?
Frightening, very concerning, and I was more worried about my children. The place where we lived was an area which you would target, I suppose, if you were looking to raise revenue through kidnapping or something else. So it was clear to me that my children were at risk, my family were at risk, people could use them to get to me. So it was definitely time to leave with all of them immediately the next day after that demonstration that I witnessed.
And I mean, you're not here to talk about the politics of it. Obviously, this is about your personal story of what you went through and losing your house in the way that you did. But in terms of the people around you there, was there a sort of appetite for something like, you know, for pro-Russian separatists to come in and to do what was being done? How were people reacting around you? Okay,
I think that, first of all, it's important to say it's not only me this has affected. You know, there's over 1 million people are displaced within Ukraine. First of all, they've moved. The city had about 1 million people in it. Now it's down to around 700,000. 300,000 have left, like we did. We're not the only ones. We're pretty high profile because of the location we lived in and because of our position, if you like, in the society there and our neighbours' positions. So they had a tougher time. Nobody wanted this to happen. You know, it was just starting really to find its feet economically and to become a very exciting place to do business, actually. Everything's now been destroyed. The airport that I used to fly in and out of cost over $700 million, only opened in 2012, and it's now rubble. It's completely gone, which tells me, of course, that the people there never had any intention of, in fact, taking this on as a state and operating it, because you try and keep the assets intact, I would have thought. But so it demonstrates to me the real underlying problem, and that is that there's been no regard or no wish to actually take over control and operate a government of any kind in that region. It's purely been an exercise in aggression. And the whole region itself, the people there wanted it to succeed. They've invested billions of dollars in that region. It was over 30% of GDP of the whole country of Ukraine. It's ground to a standstill. You can't operate, I mean, in that part of the country. So all of the mining and the steel operations and everything else are at best operating in a very much lower level than they ever were, if at all. So it's a disaster economically for Ukraine in that part of the world, as well as being a humanitarian disaster.
And the people leaving, I mean, the numbers that you're talking about obviously are huge. Is that across the society there?
Well, the people who have now taken control were the people who at the time were the most disenfranchised, disillusioned, and had the least hope of any kind of life, frankly, in the society at that time. So the people I'm seeing on the news now used to wash my car at the car wash. I mean, they will be now a colonel in the army. One of the previous leaders, his only job was Father Christmas at children's parties. He was probably earning £50 a month. These people are now running the place. So what's happened is it's turned upside down. So on you've had a massive brain drain, wealth drain from the region, because those who could leave left. You know, we're fortunate that we could leave and we could start again, or we could continue on elsewhere. But so many people can't, and the tragedy is those people that can't leave and wish to leave. But there is a huge problem with information in Russia and in eastern Ukraine, and that is that there is no access to the truth. And in fact, the easy way to solve this is to just look at the opposite of what's being said very often. You know, white is black and up is down and right is left. And those people don't understand this, because the people who are now running this, or are living there and running this place, they're not the most highly educated.
Richard Spinks, British businessman forced out of Donetsk. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, figures just released by the Electoral Commission